Hello, welcome everyone to Small Game Hunter.
Hey.
This is our 6th episode on the Happy Jacks RPG podcast network. Today we're going to talk about Girl Underground. So Girl Underground is an RPG about a curious girl on a journey with her strange companions through a wondrous world. And the media touchstones that are normally given are things like Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz or Spirited Away or Labyrinth. You know, a lot of these stories about somebody, normally a girl who travels in these places and finds weird companions, but her goal is to get back home, right. Eventually, and learn about herself in the process.
And grow as a person.
And this game is it was part of the there was like some of you who may have followed a lot of these like little indie game projects, especially on Kickstarter or whatever. You may have seen that in February, Kickstarter did this thing where they had like this zine initiative where they wanted a bunch of people to put out zines, and they were like, okay, this is the month, February 2019. Go ahead and launch this thing. And a bunch of different people kind of got on that, especially in the RPG scene. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they gave it like a good 6 months heads up. And so you'll find a whole bunch of things came out. Some of them are their own mini games. Some of them are zines where there's a couple of mini games in there. And a couple of them are just like, it could be a module, could be just like, little weird setting pieces and random tables for like OSR games, all sorts of stuff. But Lauren McManaman, who had originally written this game and had started playtesting it, she got together also with Jesse Ross, and the two of them have put this out together. And they were like, hey, we can put this out as like a preliminary game as part of the zine project. And, and they have done so, and it's a gorgeous looking zine, which if you're watching in the videos, you can see maybe there.
Yeah, not even just from the cover, but like when you look inside, like
all the artwork.
The artwork is, definitely the right flavor for what you're looking for.
And this takes me back so hard because, before there was a lot of internet, this is sort of the things that you had in gaming, not only like the traditional Dragon magazines and stuff like that, but you'd be able to go to I would go to Tower Records and go to their zine department, and there would literally be
your girl was totally like a little annoyed at first because, of course, 90s girl thought we invented zines. Right. And had to be schooled that no, zines were like, there were gaming zines way back when there were, and I was like, oh, okay, so the 90s didn't invent zines.
The zine renaissance, though. Like
it was very much, actually it was a resurgence of it.
For sure.
But you can get this in zine form if you were there for that time. I don't know that they made extras or they're still selling them.
And you pretty much said this, but this is for a lot of products, it was just a zine. It's like a super cool zine. It's self-contained, but the intent with Girl Underground is that this is preliminary to
a series of
finished product,
or a finished product. They're gonna come out with like a more full version of the game at some point down the track, right? And that would be probably like its own Kickstarter.
But amazingly, this seems very fleshed out.
It is.
It's absolutely playable as it is now.
It is. I can't see any major flaw in it whatsoever. The art is beautiful. The instructions are very in-depth.
Agreed.
And actually, if you look at the back and all the playbook advice and stuff that they give you, it's very, very playable to the extreme.
It is, because I think we've seen like the evolution of like we were talking about ash cans the other day and notebook versions, which are sometimes how folks put out incomplete games or games that aren't finished, but this feels like a very finished game.
And the only thing that probably it could use kind of in a finalized form, obviously they could put a little bit more like as far as if there's additional playbooks or other stuff, but like you said, I don't think it needs anything. But it does kind of make a little bit of an assumption, like you kind of know what you're doing getting in here. Like you've probably played a PBTA game or run it, and if you have run a PBTA game, oh my God, like the way this is laid out is exactly what I want as a GM, as somebody who wants to run a game. It gives me exactly everything.
Yeah, should we jump into the...
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. Well, once again...
Because we're getting super excited.
Yeah, we're getting super excited.
Feel it.
Which is a good sign.
I want to just go over the basic conceit of the game and what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so as players, everybody gets to play basically two characters, all right? One is one of the magical companions, sort of like a Tin Man or a lion or whatever you're going to come up with, and they have basically some playbooks for some styles of those type of companions that you choose from. But also, everybody gets to not only play the girl, but the beginning of the game starts with you basically making the girl as a group. So it's a cooperative sort of character generation where the game facilitates it by asking you a bunch of questions about the girl, and as you answer those questions, you sort of develop who the girl is. It was so easy to set up because, what were they, like 6 different playbooks?
Yeah.
6 or 8?
There's actually 7 of them. Yeah, and
7.
There weren't there. I remember when we first play tested this. The first time I got to play this was last December online when Lauren ran it for me and my partner and a couple people, and there was even fewer of them at the time. I think it was 5. So part of this project was to get a couple more of them play tested and out there. But yeah. Sorry, I misspoke. There are 6.
There's 6. Okay.
Other than the girl.
There you go.
But yeah, the beastie, which is like your talking animal, right? The construct, your Tin Man, or other kind of creature. The mythic, which is your big beast. So if you're looking at
like a dragon or a hippogriff.
What's that movie?
Falcor. You're saying Falcor from Neverending Story.
Neverending Story.
Neverending Story. Thank you. And the ogre, which is kind of like your big,
kind of like Ludo from Labyrinth.
Yeah. Yep. Giant creature. The Runaway, which is an interesting one because that's kind of like
a Peter Pan sort of.
Kind of, right? Like it's somebody who's also kind of like the girl, has run away from their world and they've ended up here, and they kind of want to stay, right? And I think the assumption is it's a child like the girl who's run away from home. The one time I played it, I kind of played it as a weird insect creature who ran away from its home for good reasons as well. So a lot of these, as we've said, are playbooks, so you can kind of skin them very much how you want, right?
Right.
The other one is the fawn, which is like this half magic creature.
Yeah.
And that could be like a mermaid, a centaur. It doesn't have to be like sometimes when you hear fawn, you think of like a satyr, like half goat dude or something. But it could be like any kind of like magic.
The playbooks are very open in giving you a general description. Which one did you play, Joey?
I played The Runaway.
What drew you to that?
Well, I think for me, it was just something slightly different. It wasn't something that I'm used to seeing in a lot of this kind of fiction. Because my touchstones are Alice in Wonderland and the Labyrinth. Like those are the things and Wizard of Oz. Like those 3 things really drew me to this game at first. And it was a playbook that I wasn't easily associating with any of those characters. So I wanted to see how could this character fit into that world that I'm so used to seeing without it. And I also had a kind of a really fun idea for a concept for the character, and that was like, okay, this cool concept, which playbook's going to fit that concept the best? And so that was the one that ended up working the best for me. But it was interesting, and he was, I think, looking at it objectively, it's kind of like it's a touchstone for the girl. It's this person also knows the girl's world, and this person decided to stay. And so I think it's a way to play that character, play that playbook. That's your role. Your role is to be like, I understand both worlds too, but here's why I stayed, and maybe you want to stay too, or maybe you shouldn't stay, and I'm a warning as to staying.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great observation. I think one of the interesting things about the characters here, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys think of playing, because I've only played once, right, which was with Lauren, and I also played The Runaway, and I found that with a lot of one thing that you have to feel that's a little different than a lot of other RPGs is you're not coming in and playing a character that's going through their own arc. Your character is not about growth and discovery. Your character is kind of about being who they are and being with the girl who's going on.
That was actually a revelation to me. Yeah. So I know we haven't dove into really the sequence of play yet.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But that's what I you do sit down, and even if and you're familiar with these games where there's like a shared character or there's a narrative character that we're all like say For the Queen, where we're all kind of role-playing around this scenario with this other character that's a predominant part of the table. I was not still expecting that to happen, where what Thomas is talking about is that our characters really facilitated the growth and the development of the girl. And I thought that was super cool, because you do sit down when you choose a character and you think about how I'm going to play this character and what kind of impact this character is going to have in play, and you of course understand, because the playbooks are really well written, and like Joey was saying, each playbook has kind of a different role with how it engages with the girl, whether it's a support role or investigatory sort of help. The runaway, I would say, is kind of the exploration and is the local kind of.
Yeah.
I played a construct, and the construct is all about like the construct looks up to the girl, but has major empathy. Like empathy chip is big, so they kind of cue into like all the other characters' longing and kind of reinforces and encourages the girl. So I just thought that was really cool, and I didn't realize that till about halfway through play, because it reminded me of Bluebeard's Bride.
Yeah.
Where there is a part of that game where you really feel like you have the agency when you have the ring. And you had the agency, it seemed like more of the agency when you had the girl.
Yeah.
But this is not a bad thing. Do you want to talk about that?
Because actually, touching upon that, when I was looking over the playbooks, when it obvious from the die mechanic, which is a 2d6. 6 or less is a failure, 7 or better is a success, 10 through 12 is usually you get something a little bit extra.
Like your standard PBTA.
Standard PBTA. So if you've played that before, the die mechanics is exactly the same. But what I started looking at, like I do with all these PBTA games, is I start looking at the moves, which to me very much sort of like dictate what the focus or the drive of the character is supposed to be. So when I looked at, I played the Ogre, and the Ogre, what I found so incredibly interesting about the Ogre was that he was there to provide physical help and support to the girl. He's obviously the big lug. He's going to get there and try to distract people. No, attack me, that kind of thing. Those were his moves. But whenever he would fail at the move, I noticed that it would be a situation like, the thing is, why did you not let her solve her own problem? And why do you feel bad about that? And I found that to be such an interesting thing because as a guy, you constantly just want to protect, you want to help, you want to solve problems, but a lot of times you sort of like end up taking control over things that you really probably shouldn't and just let other people be. And I found that to be a really interesting thing to explore in the game, and it was just an extra layer of depth to the whole character concept that made me happy, which is why I made sort of like a soldiery type guy.
I think what's also interesting, like we're talking about these moves, and with this game, one thing that is, immediately apparent is there are no basic moves.
Yeah.
Right? So like in a lot of Apocalypse World-based games, right, there's the basic moves that all of us can do, and then our archetype can do our special thing. And here, the girl has her things that she can do, and the various characters have their things that they can do. And that's the only thing they can do is their specific 5 moves, right? So there isn't a move for like defending the girl unless you are specifically that character that kind of does that thing, right? And so I think that's kind of fascinating, right?
I liked that too, and I think the other thing is I liked the particular tweak that Lauren and Jesse made with the standard PBTA. So it isn't just like as you do, because there is no 10 plus really. It is just strictly when you look at the moves. We don't have a character sheet, I don't think, but if you can see. That it's kind of like a I don't know, success column, I'm going to call it, and then
like the miss column.
A miss column, but there is no whiff. So what we noticed about this is that each of those, you're going to do the thing you want to do pretty much regardless in this narrative. But what happens is each of those sides has, like if you did the 7 plus, you kind of get an extra win narrative behind it, but there is still something that I guess goes wrong, or that like flavors it in not a perfect way.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the flip.
Yeah. Do you want to like give an example?
So like let's go with the Ogre's moves, and the cool thing about it is like center of attention. Roll when you attempt to draw attention away from the girl. So let's say that the girl is in the middle of this crowd and they're like being mean to her, and you want to go, no, look at me. So on a 7 plus, it asks you questions. Everything about this game is basically questions. So character generation of the girl. The facilitator basically just usually asks questions, and that's the way that the game moves. So how do you keep attention focused squarely on you? And that's what you get at a 7 plus. You just get to narrate how you succeed, how that happens. But the cool thing about it too is on a 7 through 9, also, how does the tension make you uneasy? So if you roll a 7 to 9, it's sort of a success with cost sort of thing.
Yeah.
While on a 10 plus, you just get that thing. And then on a 6, how do you accidentally draw attention towards the girl? So it asks you a question of like, well, you failed. Now you've done exactly the opposite of what you want to do. It's sort of within the realm of the action, but describe how that happens.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that unlike moves in PBTA, there are no triggers. You just do the move. There's no like, when this happens, do this.
Well,
I think there is.
There are triggers.
The trigger's the narrative.
The trigger, I guess, is kind of like when you read
But I
it, it says
understand what you're
roll
saying.
when you
Yeah.
do the thing.
Right.
Encourage the girl with your humanity
Yeah.
or whatever it is. That's kind of like the trigger.
Yeah.
And
It's a little different.
but I think what I love about it is that if you're not used to these type of games, like I think
Yeah.
for someone who's played PBTA games, you look at the moves and you're like, okay, when do these things happen? Obviously, that's what my character does. But on the front part of this sheet for each of them, it has a little box and it says, when you portray this character, try doing the following. And it gives you like this little bullet point list of stuff, right? So, when you're playing the fawn or the mythic here, honor your kin, inspire the girl, make the ultimate sacrifice, feel heavy with nostalgia, whatever. And if you play toward those things, it just so happens that those are kind of like the triggers for some of the moves, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of makes it really easy for you, without even looking at the moves, to just look at the front, go, oh, this is kind of what it wants me to do. And if you didn't even know the moves and you were doing that thing, and the guide or GM like knew kind of like the mechanics more, they would see you hitting those triggers and kind of
For sure. And then just to kind of reinforce the whole, there's not a 10 plus, there's the 7 plus and the 6 minus. What I'm giving these guys total bona fides, total kudos for this, because I think it really reflects the flavor of that kind of story. Because this isn't a kind of story about a comic book hero or an epic adventurer. This is a person, this is a young girl, a 12-year-old girl, who is in a world that is totally topsy-turvy in some way, however you make it. So it doesn't have to be the Alice in Wonderland thing. It doesn't, it could be, a different flavor of that. But what I really like about that is because success does come with weirdness, probably. Because this is not, we're not in Kansas anymore sort of thing. So I just thought they did such a great job. Like, it's a tiny thing and it seems like inconsequential or maybe something that a person you don't think about, but it is really an elegant way to approach this kind of narrative.
And so much of it is kind of like formatting. Like if you look at it, like not so easy to read, right?
Yeah.
Like 6 minus, 7 plus.
Yeah.
And there's a distinction though. Like when you roll 10 or higher, or when you roll 7 to 9, I should say, it gives you that extra question of like, ooh, and what else kind of thing. But like it just makes it so easy that this is broken down, and so many of the moves do not imply failure. Like a lot of the times the 6 minus actually doesn't say anything about not doing the thing. Instead it just adds what weird thing is
happened because you did this
and
thing.
that is the story, right? Alice in Wonderland is not about the girl not getting something done. It's always moving the story forward.
Well, the thing is, this is intended to tell stories about discovery. And it's not intended to really tell stories about conflict resolution. It's intended, and that's why what I love about the format is that everything comes into a question, because everything you do is discovering something.
See, I would slightly disagree, because I think there is conflict resolution in the form of the manners and the.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe we want to talk a little bit about the sequence of play.
Maybe we want to talk about
maybe
that.
we do.
Like where we started when we played, and how we've formed like our world and our girl and stuff like that, because that talks about that a lot.
So manners is a thing intrinsic to the girl, right? Like you have like the playbooks, which are all of our characters. And this is one other interesting thing, by the way. We haven't mentioned this, and I don't think any of us really noticed it through the game as such. It didn't affect the game. But there are no stats for any of the characters either, right? So you're never rolling plus or minus things, except for one place, and that's with the girl, right? Because the girl has some very special moves, and there's this thing called the list of manners. So maybe we'll talk about that first, because this is part of the game generation, right? For sure.
So on the camera, you'll see this huge list of manners.
And I mean, these things represent kind of like those things from society and like how
expected behavior.
Yeah, these are the rules that the girls have been given, growing up with. What are some examples like young ladies must never talk back to their elders, or young ladies must never take up too much space. And they give like a good list of like 30 of these as examples. You don't play with all of them. You just we go around the table and everyone kind of selects a couple. And one of the things that it says in the book is to select 8 of them. I've run this twice now, and I talked to Lauren about it, and 8 is kind of a little bit heavy if you're doing like a one-shot, and this game is really would sing really well over a couple of sessions.
Right.
But if you're doing a one-shot, I tried with our game just to do 6 of them, and I felt like that was kind of like the right amount for like a 4-hour game or whatever. Right. But these are the things that the girl has kind of been expected to deal with, right? I'm going to segue for just a second before we dive into manners a little more deeply and just talk about safety, because this is a very important conversation that's early on in this book, and they've done a very good job talking about a couple of factors, and it really links into manners a little bit, because the tool that they talk about as far as safety tools and safety mechanics, we're used to seeing it sometimes as the X card, if you're familiar with that. If not, look it up. It's great, X card RPG. The X card is a little bit simplistic in what it does. For me, what I love about it is it reminds us to have a conversation at the table and reminds us that we care about each other. Like, that's the main reason it's there. But the tool that they actually recommend in this game is written by Bo Sheldon, and he's written a tool called the script change tool, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the script change tool is a little more nuanced than the X card. It's like the X card taken to the next level, where it's got like, a fast forward button, which is kind of like a fade to black, or a rewind button to kind of go back and X out content or whatever, or a pause button if you need to take a break or talk about something, or like that kind of thing. And so it has like a couple of these different components which allow you to modify the story, according to need. And the reason I bring it up right now is because we're talking about manners, and manners are very, a lot of them are conforming to gender norms. And that's, if you look at some of the media touchstones here, that's what those stories are sometimes about, is overcoming some of those limitations that society's put on us. But not everybody wants to play with these if they're dealing with them in their own life. Mm-hmm. So there's a list of 30 of them, and I'm sure most people would be able to find some they're comfortable with. But you might hit one or two where people are like, I have to deal with that already, or I don't want to deal with that kind of thing in my game today. So this is a very important part of choosing the manners, is remembering we've already had
kind
this
of the notes you want to hit as the girl, and then in response to or support with the support characters.
Well, what I think was cool too, because it's very ordered in how you build the girl and how you build the companions. It's all in a very specific order, and the manners are chosen kind of after you've already built who the girl is. Right. So you kind of, the manners at that point are almost second nature. It's like, we've kind of built this girl, and she's clever and smart and kind of a tomboy, and obviously you want to pick manners and are going to rebel against that.
Right.
Because that's fun,
right? You kind of build your own,
and that's
conflict.
Probably what our girl is doing. It's like, these are the things in her life that go against what her her belief. Do we want to talk about that for a second? There are manners, and then what can happen with the manners?
So basically, the mechanical thing about the manners and the beliefs is that you have a manner. And that's the thing. So there comes a point in the storyline where the girl will basically go against those manners and says, no, I don't want to do that. It's silly because I need to do this. And then what you would do is flip the card over that has the manner and then put a belief that's sort of like the contradictory idea that you have that basically subverts that manner in your own mind. And then you put that down. And then when you have those beliefs, you can use those beliefs to tap, much like aspects in Fate, to give yourself an extra die on a roll, because that applies to the situation you want. So the cool thing about it is that the more you discover about yourself, the more rebellious you become, the more truer to yourself you become, the more powerful a character you actually mechanically are in the game. Which is, one of the best sort of empowerment mechanics I've ever seen in a game, which is really super fun.
I would totally agree, because I think it is that thing where it's not that you are saying F you to the manner, it's that your intrinsic and individual belief pushes up against that sometimes, so that there are times, I'm trying to remember what manner it was that was her first one, we were like, nope.
Oh, yeah.
Let me look. I can probably find it.
Yeah, because ultimately there was a manner that was...
Listen to your elders, maybe? Because that guy
No,
was
it was totally a Winston thing.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Because we took something that was basically like be polite or never express your emotions or something like that.
Something like that.
And we threw a rock at a bully.
Yeah.
So we basically changed that belief to, don't tolerate bullies or
tolerate
stand
bullies,
up to
yeah.
bullies.
Stand up to
Ladies must never put others in their place.
Yes.
That's what it
yeah.
was.
Thank
Which
you.
which is not necessarily, our girl wouldn't have necessarily thought that was a terrible thing and that you should never abide by that societally, but that there are times that we believe that we would stand up to bullies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's two elements here. Like, one, the game is so clever in that, like, the part of our setup was creating the girl, creating these manners, and then deciding the one manner that would get her into that world. And that was the one, right? So you immediately, in the beginning of the game, get to practice what this is to buck one of these manners, create a belief, right?
Yeah.
Without any mechanics. There's no die rolls involved there. That's just part of the setup. And then we played through, like, how does that get us to the door to this magic world?
So it's already like an intrinsic prelude to the story that actually got you to know what the mechanic was like, and more importantly, got you to understand what the manners and beliefs are, which are intrinsic part of this.
And as you start using more and more of those beliefs, like, it becomes easier to overcome more obstacles. I think the name of the move is really cool too. This is on the girls' playbook. There's one called Refuse to Mind Your Manners, right?
Yeah.
And when you do that, that's when you flip over the manner and write the belief regardless of the outcome of the die roll. So there is a die roll.
Yeah.
You roll 2d6,
Yeah.
but whether it's 6 minus or 7 plus, either way, you're getting rid of that manner, you're putting a belief there, and then the die roll kind of affects some of the consequences, like how did you go too far? Or
How will you do better to rebel against this belief or this manner later?
Right.
Something to that effect.
Yeah. And then so the way the mechanic works later, like when we want to grab these beliefs and then they kind of make us, in a sense, more powerful to overcome these obstacles, it's they stand strong in your convictions, right?
Uh-huh.
So stand strong in your conviction, in your convictions is the, how do I overcome these other obstacles? And the more of these beliefs that you can pull from, in that specific scenario, kind of like the more dice you get.
Right.
And this game, for that one spot, you have what's kind of like an advantage roll, right? So if you're familiar with like D&D 5e or some other games, you can roll a couple of d6s and you take the two highest. So you can imagine toward the end of, like, if we were playing a longer game, and at this point we have like 5 beliefs that we feel strong with, and they all kind of apply to this situation. You're rolling like this handful of dice and you're really empowered, because you've learned all these things.
And then I was just going to say, in contrast to that, the support characters, our playbooks, like, always roll 2d6. I think pretty much across the board we're rolling 2d6. But it's the girl who grows through the storytelling, like you were just saying, who the more in touch with herself and her individuality and her own inner strength and powers she becomes more powerful.
And it's funny because when we were playing, we had mentioned on one of our breaks that one of the things that felt kind of odd about trying to do this as a full campaign is that the companions, there doesn't seem much of an advancement mechanic.
Yes.
But I was thinking about it after, I'm like, well, that's because the girl gets the advancement. You challenge those manners, create those beliefs that increases your convictions, and it's kind of the group is leveling up together, which is really kind of cool and interesting.
And it ties into that observation we had where it's like us as companion characters, like, it's not so much we're developing, it's really like as the group or as the girl.
Well, if you look at a lot of these types of stories, a lot of ways the companions are set up to be sort of parts of the girl's own psyche or representations of that. And when you look at it from that angle, it's basically her own psyche trying to buttress herself and grow throughout the story.
I think that's very true. I think what the little bit of counter to that, though, that I would say is the characters are not two-dimensional, the support characters.
Yes.
And so there is a tiny bit of growth because there is something with every character that they desire.
Yeah.
So whether, like, I loved my construct. So that's the thing. It's like I freaking loved playing the girl, like we were talking about, but I loved when other people played the girl. So it wasn't one of those things where I'll be honest, when I play Bluebeard's Bride, like I want that, I want that effing ring.
Right.
Like, give me the ring because I can do all the stuff. This one was cool. Like, I loved seeing other people play the girl. I loved playing the girl because I loved my own character too. Because my character had a desire also. And so by the coming together of the characters and that meeting of the girl, we get to kind of grow and develop and have that little bit of growth ourselves too. So we're more fulfilled when we're part of the girls' posse.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about the companions is that all of their development is all story based. There isn't any kind of mechanical advancement, but you definitely grow as a person in the story aspect. And then when you get to the epilogues, like when our epilogues were fantastic, our companions were completely changed from when they started.
Yep.
And that was all just based on what happened in the story. It had nothing to do with the die roll.
Absolutely, and I think all of us, we got to say what are like kind of our driving desire was.
Yeah.
Like, so we got to fill that in. So as we built our for me, the construct, which I built this rad. See, like I totally want to talk about my character. He's a fountain pen named Monty that sounded like a don't know, British Imperial, like the total British Empire.
Cogsworth. You were Cogsworth the pen.
Yeah.
Was I? Okay.
A little bit. The voice, it was good. It was very good. I liked it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Pip Cheerio.
Yeah.
Old Bean. Yeah.
And that there are a lot of great opportunities in there when you're telling the story to have your characters develop in exactly an RP sense. But one of the things that I really enjoyed is watching everybody play the girl and seeing how the girl was fairly consistent in her motivations and what she did, but she was very, very different whenever she changed hands. And it was kind of, it's kind of at the beginning we were going a lot of different directions, and everybody sort of started working towards getting a little bit more aligned into the feel of the girl that we as a unit came up with. Because I made some different choices after watching Joey play. I made some different choices after watching you play her, because I wanted to sort of like start moving towards one direction in the development of the girl. And I found that to be a fascinating RP exercise. The shared characters kind of fun.
I thought so too, and I think your really good point, Jim, is that because even we've played together before and we're all pretty seasoned role players, but like you have those notes like Tom was talking about before, where not only did we build the character and what her physicality is and how she has what her interfamily relationship is like and that sort of thing, but there are notes about playing the girl too, about constantly asking questions and probing and things like that. So I didn't think it was bad when we would hit different notes because we were hitting notes on that character sheet. Yeah. So scene by scene, that totally works for the girl.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
so that was cool.
When you make the girl, one of the main things that you decide is the girl's name, and the girl's name is derived from what your family always has love. Okay, so you always come from a loving family, but it also is always missing something. So let's say if your family is missing curiosity, your name is Cat. If your family is missing magic, your name is Faye. If your family is missing money, your name is Penny, so to speak. So,
and by the way, there's always a blank for every option. So in our case, we actually took advantage of that.
Yeah. Right? What did we do? What did we do?
We did
remember.
Joy.
Our family was missing Joy.
So we named her Joy.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I know PBTA games are known for doing, like, having great lists, but this game has great lists.
Yeah, it really
has
does.
really great lists.
Really themed perfectly. They all mean something.
Perfectly manicured. I mean, it really kind of blew me away how easily we made this girl with basically one page of questions, and she became a very vivid character almost instantly to me.
Yeah, and kind of, we didn't talk about this, but the first thing we did is kind of decided what sort of period we wanted to play with.
Yeah, and there's a tendency to go with like that like Victorian style, or like the 30s or something, like because you're seeing that a lot of those touchstones play with that kind of time frame. But the time I played earlier in the week, a couple days before our game, we played in kind of like the 80s, early 90s. And just had kind of like, an immigrant family new to the U.S. and they're out in the Midwest and whatever. I've heard of at least one game that was kind of set in a more like futuristic setting. which I thought was interesting.
Oh, totally.
But one of the things we talked about was maybe playing in like a very older, like 17th century or earlier time, and how like I recall like we had that discussion and it was like, okay, that's cool, but then we were worried like what would fantasy look like, because to us that already is fantasy. And I remember, Jim, you mentioning amongst our conversations that maybe that world is like a future looking world, right? Like what we would consider as like modern or kind of like 5 minutes in the future, like that would be their fantasy world, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, you could totally easily like skin it that way, right? And it would have a different flavor, because you'd be like, oh, she's coming to our world, like we're familiar with this world. This isn't,
the whole flipping the script situation where the fantasy world is a world that's far more accepting and free than the world that she came from, and then learning those lessons there would actually also be an interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
Or it could be the modern U.S. and maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Sad but true.
5 minutes in the future.
Yeah.
But we decided to do something that was just post World War I sort of time period.
Yeah.
And that really informed a lot of things about our characters. I mean, Joey's character and my character in particular were very much sort of like, yours was a runaway whose brother died in the war.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why he ran away. And mine was a doughboy tin soldier. That was, he was sort of like a reflection of the war from the point of view of a child. It sort of looks like a game to them because they don't understand the true horror of it.
And I thought that was cool because I think you represented the soldiers, and I felt like my character represented the war at home.
Absolutely.
And it was kind of
totally.
a cool analog.
And I was just a Mont Blanc pen, which was invented in 1906, and I played it as a British imperial officer, empire sort of guy.
Well, but it was cool because the pen, because we established when we were building the girl that she wrote stories, so the pen had a big significance to her, which again, I really have to applaud them for the way they organize how you build the world before you start playing, because you build everything about the girl's world before you even look at the companion books. And so, kind of like Wizard of Oz, where the three companions are the three farmhands, and the Wicked Witch is the woman who's trying to take her dog, and you can build the companions to be analogs to the people in the girl's real world, which I think just gives them so much more weight and so much more to play with.
Oh, for sure.
I found that the grounding that we had in the real world that reflected in our fantasy world really added a lot to the gameplay.
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize. So you guys flesh this out. I'm trying to remember how. Did our world pretty much just came about once we just established the period in the construction of the girl, right? So because I'm thinking about the fact that the whole school got tied in because I said she looked up to, there's a question about the girl about.
So if you're going to be running
this is cool.
This game, like one of the great things about the girl playbook is kind of as the guide or GM, you're kind of going through this and asking everybody around the table questions, right? So that first thing about what is your family lacking and what your name is, that's a collective thing. We do that collectively.
Yeah.
But afterwards, I start just directly asking specific players questions to flesh out the girl. And this could be things like, what's her hair look like? How does she speak? Like some of these are like little, choose your own, thing. But then afterwards, they give you a whole list of questions that you're supposed to continue to flesh things out. So I was just using some of those questions and adding other ones, like who is that bully in class, or where do you go to seek solace or whatever. And so like those questions are there, and they have a great list of sample questions in here to kind of like help you ask the other players and then start guiding that whole feeling of what the girl looks like and what she's dealing with on a regular basis, right? And you start creating a couple of NPCs, right? Oh, the bully. What's his name?
Winston.
Billy. It's almost always Billy, right? Winston in this case. And so like, we had, like a couple of characters by the time that was done to that point.
Well, and this was just the second time you ran Girl Underground, and it was seamless. Tones, do you want to talk about a little bit too about like after I thought everything 100% was coming out of your head, which I know you can do,
right?
And we can.
Well, let's just say I'm amazing. No,
you are.
No.
But
you'll get no argument from me.
After the game,
I'm going to tell
take a vote.
Why
amazing.
But I'm going to tell you why I look so
there,
amazing.
Dog.
Right?
I'm sorry.
No, we did.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest that the first time I ran it earlier in the week, I didn't feel that same level of confidence. I think if you ask the those players, they would tell you like, yeah, it was a great game because we had a good debrief afterwards. But I didn't feel as confident with it, and I felt like there was a lot of stuff for me to kind of like try to keep track of and make work well. But what makes this game sing so well is like they have written, and I'm talking about Lauren and Jesse here, have written a section toward the back here about the game, and it's a checklist. And it just goes through, and it's about like 4 pages of stuff, and it kind of breaks down like what a one-shot looks like, or even, you know, a small couple sessions where, you know, setting expectation and tone. This should take about 15 minutes. Here's what you're going to do. And then safety tools, 5 minutes. Here's what you want to talk about. And they just kind of break it down point by point, and it just really helps kind of like lead you into how to get this story going. Now, I mean, I'm going to admit, like, I have experience playing games like this because I'm very used to playing a lot of games which have to do with asking a lot of questions of the players, right? Yeah. And this game heavily, I don't want to say just relies on it, but it kind of expects it, fosters it, and I think it sings with it, right? But it gives you those questions, right? The girl, go through the playbook and ask everybody questions, great. And then, hey, ask them more questions like, what is your home life like? And here's a list of them, and it gives you this beautiful list of questions similar to the ones that I asked you guys, right? Then there's the, okay, we've created our girl now, how do we find the door? And even finding the door, it wasn't like me as the GM going like, okay, this is how it works.
No,
it was questions. Okay, you answered a question about like where she likes to go. Great. Yeah. She starts heading that direction, and this happens. What does she do? Oh, great. Yeah. And then this happens. What does she do? So it was just constantly like round robbing who was controlling the girl, and just answering questions about what's happening.
I'm sure it just at some point it had occurred to you that like, oh, this is totally how this is going to happen. She's just going to find herself there. So our girl didn't fall down a hole or look in a mirror or, you know, go through a wardrobe or, but it was very cool because we were, it was kind of like, you know, you're on the rope.
Hand by hand, and like suddenly you're there.
And all of a sudden we were there.
You're just like, okay, this is it. This is where she goes in. Yeah. And I've played it twice, or ran it twice now, and both times it was like that. When I played it, when Lauren was running it, again, very, very similar. It was just like, we're just sitting there, like wandering around, and suddenly you're like, okay, I see where this is going, and the story is just magically unfolding in front of you.
And then even in the world, like, once again, I thought, Tones is amazing. We know Tones is amazing, but still.
So the nice thing about this book is they give you these locations.
Yeah,
so,
it's just so great.
And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the GM support in a second, but like just the locations are, you know, as examples, the Adventurer's Tomb. Some of that we used was the Fairy Ring and the Hall of 10,000 Masks. And like these are like little spots. Each one is a page or like half a page, and it gives you like a couple characters and maybe some troubles that are happening there and a few questions. And then it does have a little description at the bottom, like half a page of like, this is kind of what it might be like. But even there, it's very vague. It's like, this character might be, you know, a real strong antagonist and really corrupt around this. Or, you know what, they might be kind of empathetic in this way. You know, like, so it gives you options on how to kind of use that spot.
Like other games like Companion's Tale, for instance, has that map building where you start building those places in the world, and it's part of the creativity of the game. But this one actually sort of more guides you in certain places without having to draw that map, and gives you like a couple of anchor places, but everything surrounding it is completely up to you. So this is a little bit more guided, I think, than some of those other games, and gives you a little bit more meat to work with. So I think this is a great game for people that especially for facilitators/GMs that might be a little bit hesitant in whether they want to come up with all this stuff on the fly by themselves. Like there's a lot of pressure on that, and I get it. But this really gives you a lot of tools and a lot of cues, and the fact that they're constantly asking you questions, and when you're asked a direct question and you come up with an answer, it's a lot easier than here's just what.
And
what's your game?
I'll be honest, like these the sheets, like what is, and exactly what you're saying, Jim. Like if I was someone who wasn't used to playing this game, I would rely very heavily on this, but it would still feel good. Like it would feel kind of fluid. It would have questions that you get to ask the players and have them contribute. You'd be using more of this skeletal structure here. I probably used like the name of the place, sometimes like one or maybe two of the characters,
Yeah.
and maybe one or two questions.
Sometimes
and
all
I
you need is
ignored
the name of the place.
everything else. No,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
So you can take exactly what you want from this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it gives you kind of like these thematic places and things, and then like instead of using the fairy ring or the Howl of 10,000 Masks the way it's written here, I knew already enough of the story where it's like, okay, I'm going to use it kind of in a way that works with our story, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And just play with it.
Well, and like you said, it has enough support
Yeah.
where it is literally a game you can pull out of your pocket and play with your team, your table. If like somebody is late for a session, or they can't make a session, or you're playing games on demand and you want to offer a bunch of stuff,
Absolutely.
but you don't want to have to do too much heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But there's so much engagement from the players in creating the final narrative that it just
What really
you don't have to do all that heavy
really
lifting.
blows me away, and you mentioned this before, Gina, and it is 100% true, is that the game centers around making the girl, and once you make the girl, everything is sort of just falls into place so easily. Once you understand who the girl is, I can see from a facilitator point of view, once the players decide who that character is, it becomes such an easy process to just, all right, so this is our motivations, this is who she's about, this is what she wants. Creating a story around getting her where she needs to be becomes relatively easy, because the amount of detail that's demanded from you really makes that a no-brainer.
So, and to something that Joey said earlier, like when the part we just reviewed was like, some of the setup and whatever, and then you create the girl, and then you get to the underground, and it's at that point where you are now told to select the companions, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's another fantastic thing where it's like you don't get pigeonholed into like creating a character that now suddenly doesn't really fit with the story, or like it's really, again, clever design. Like we've all collaboratively created the beginning of this story, and we don't know what's next. And now we're creating those characters that are next. And by now we have a better idea of kind of like what
That was
those
really
are, and
smart. Yeah,
really smart.
I like the characters coming after the girl, because then you see, like we talked about earlier through play, that the girl is,
she's the
girl's
character.
thing.
She is the character.
Yeah.
The girl's the
Yeah.
thing. And just to quickly go through the rest of this thing, like it has you introduce the companions kind of one by one in some scenes. It has you go through some locations as having an adventure, maybe 30 minutes a location or something like that. And again, these are like loose guidelines. And then a couple of, like a final confrontation, a journey home. And you can kind of use these to whatever extent you need to. But yeah. So like I felt very supported. I want that's kind of where I want to get with this. Like as the guide, for the game, I felt like the game in this limited like small form, right? Like just this little zine, it gives me exactly what I need. That's basically my cheat sheet to guide you through the game without having to remember everything or do a bunch of homework. It gives me all the locations that I can look at during the break, right? You guys create your companions. We take a 5-minute break. I flip through those locations and go like, yeah, this one, maybe that one.
But there were
And then we
built-in
kinda
breaks
see.
into the game where that was part of the deal, which is great.
Do you want to talk about that for a little bit more? Because that was such a great idea.
Well, yeah. When you go through the sequence of play in the book, it'll actually says, "We'll take a 15-minute break at this point once you've done this process," and that little bit of a break actually really allowed me, once I've made a decision, to really sort of like look at what I had, analyze it, and really interpret it into something that I wanted to do in the game. And the way that those breaks were sort of set up in that you made the girl, you had a discussion about her, then you took a little bit of a break, then you decided to talk about what some setting things and some background stuff about the girl, and all of this stuff was basically us throwing chips into the kitty, the facilitator sort of picking up those chips, stacking them out right, and everybody had a chance to sort of analyze what they were doing. So I find that these super creative games there's a difficulty level when you try to accelerate the pace of them a little bit too much, because a lot of people need a little bit of time to process all of this information and come up with something. And when you feel like you're being put on the spot, it gets a little bit difficult, because and the fact that you can go, give me a minute, Joey, do you got something? And the cool thing about these cooperative games is any time when somebody was like, for a little bit too long, Tomes would go, all right, well, why don't you think about that for a little bit? Who's got something?
Right.
And then somebody would have something, and the game would just flow that way.
For sure. The other thing I really like about the built-in breaks is that I think we didn't specifically say this, I don't think, earlier, but this is a girl. So it's a 12-year-old girl. We're not, I'm sure you could hack it and do a thing, but this is the exploration of a 12-year-old girl or someone who's born girl.
Right.
But you could...
And we'll talk about the gender stuff in a minute.
I was going to say, do you want to segue into that? Because that's what I wanted to talk about, is that you could explore some really, really cool stuff with this, and that those could be used as kind of safety breaks.
And there is a really good section. So like this book is not very long, right? It's a total of 48 half-size pages, right? Like zine pages. And there's 2 whole pages just given to expectation, gender, and safety, right? Talking about the safety tools and things like that. And so even with the gender stuff, like the idea is that the girl is a, again, 12-year-old character by default, someone who identifies as a girl at the start of the game. This could be somebody that was assigned female at birth. It doesn't have to be. So we refer to her as the girl, and we use she, her pronouns during the game. But if gender exploration is something that you want to include in the game, like they talk about that here, right? So, does the girl always identify as a girl, or, does society see her as a girl, whatever. Like that's something that you can explore. If that's not really your thing either, then you just play whatever Alice in Wonderland is, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, those themes weren't necessarily something that was explored in those stories.
But what's cool, too, is that they really reinforce that again with the manners. Because there's actually a manner in there that says girls are always referred to as she.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, if you want to go that way, if that's the story you want to tell, it is there for you.
There's also, I think there's a manner that girls don't ever act like boys.
Yes.
So I
young ladies must never try on other genders.
Yes.
Right? Like that's one of the manners, right?
Yeah, no, and I would love to play the game in that way with a table at some point, because I just think that would be a great experience, because I think this game is written that you can explore all sorts of, like, we decided we were going to play something that was maybe a little more like what a table, just random table, would approach the game the first time, like probably more like an Alice in Wonderland or a Labyrinth or something like that. But you can explore thematically, you could explore a lot of different kind of coming into yourself
also
sort of stories.
Kind of related to that, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this game is that there was a lot of exploration about growing up female and a female experience. This is very much centered around sort of like a girl's experience, and from a cis white male type point of view, being able to give tools where I'm asked questions and sort of like very softly put into that situation where I don't feel uncomfortable and I don't feel like I'm exploiting anything. This entire time I actually felt like I was trying to discover, I was trying to understand, and I was playing the role. And the game is very well designed in making that very comfortable for a player, especially the ones that are hypersensitive about that stuff. I never really want to be that kind of person. I'd love to see what it's like. I like to talk about it, but I don't want to ever seem like I'm doing a disservice or being an ist in any way. And this game made it very easy for me to feel very comfortable.
Yeah, and I think like I've talked to Lauren before and heard her talk about kind of in some other interviews and other places about the game as well. And one of the things that I remember her saying is that there's a lot of games out there that explore that kind of like feminine experience, right? Or that experience of being, a woman or identifying as a woman and having to deal with certain types of things. And a lot of those games that we're familiar with are focused around certain types of experience, like horror or, kind of like the negative aspects of being a woman, right? And that, some of that's like Bluebeard's Bride does that fabulously, right?
Absolutely.
Or, and there's a couple of other games out. But like, she wanted specifically to have a game that kind of explores some of that, what is it like to be proud of and to live with and enjoy and learn to be, a woman in that world.
For me, it plays more innocence blossoming and hopeful.
Right.
So even as we are coming into ourselves, and so we're growing, it's maybe that step from 12 to 13 to 14. it was very empowering and hopeful, and not
not
like
preachy or sanctimonious in any way whatsoever.
no, and not horrifying.
Yeah.
You know, it just was, and so I could totally see playing that from other points of view as well. Like if you you could be male at birth, but I identify as the girl.
Yeah.
I'm the girl.
Yeah.
And I think it would do that really well.
So I think one other thing, as far as like running the game, so one thing that I found is that, if you're going to run it as a one-shot, again, definitely take advantage of their guide at the end, because that thing really keeps you on pace, which is fantastic, because I have the pacing problem where I'll like, oh yeah, we could sit here and talk for an hour about the world and what we're going to get into. But when it says, set up this thing, 15 minutes, give or take, you're like, okay, that's keeping me kind of on track. And it keeps you on track to be able to tell a fulfilling story in that one-shot 3-4 hour period, right? I think definitely take a look at that. If you're doing a one-shot, the recommendation in the book is choose 8 manners, and I think 8's a little bit heavy. I think that's a perfect, I think that's right for doing like a 2-shot or 3 sessions or something like that, where you want that slow build and getting to explore lots of different things that you're going to break down. But as a one-shot, you don't want the players to have too much to focus on, and they already have a lot. So having like 8 manners in the center of the table is kind of like a little bit heavy as well, and it makes the focus a little bit hard to pinpoint. But do like we did. I think we chose like the new girl. We chose 2 each, and we chose ones that were thematically very appropriate to the girl that we had created in the world we were in. Yep. So it was very easy to target.
But then again, we only really flipped 3.
We only flipped 3 of them. And the goal doesn't have to be like
to flip them all. But what I like about having that many is that you really have an opportunity to explore different things and not pigeonhole like, oh, well, we always picked 1 each, so we have to hit these tick marks. You have a couple other ones to kind of play around with, and if we get them all, great. If not, we have options.
There's narrative flexibility there to explore.
But also, I think something that also would have worked is that we could have gone for 8, but then none of these stopped at 6. I can't find any more that I really think that really center around what this girl is about and the way that we built her, and just stop there. I mean, I think the important thing about the manners list is to sort of try to keep on track with the character and the story arc that she's going to be going through, and not put things that are going to basically try to make a tangent for that in some way.
I think one other thing I want to point the viewers at home at is the last page here. Well, the second to last page. The last page actually has this cool list of names that you can pull from. So if you're one of those people who can't think of a name off the top of your hat, great, they've got you covered. But the second to last page is playbook advice. And what's really cool is it breaks down these characters as far as what they're trying to kind of symbolize or portray. And as a guide, it helps you determine kind of like, how do I want to put obstacles in the way of these things? So like, let's take an example of the ogre, right? So the ogre is the shame and self-confidence of adolescents. They should bounce between feeling powerful and feeling ashamed. Give them chances to be brave, but contain them when they take over a scene and try to do too much. Make their consequences awkward and self-conscious. Lead them into situations where they can't help but step on their friends' toes, both figuratively and literally.
Nice.
So like, every single one of the playbooks, it's kind of broken down, like you're kind of getting to see the game designer behind the game.
Absolutely.
But also now as the guide and trying to run this game, I want to be authentic, like you're talking about. I want to be authentic to what is the game trying to give us as a narrative framework and as a story, and that really helps me.
Absolutely.
The first time I ran it, I think, I mean, I knew it was there, but like I was kind of like dealing with lots of stuff. And I didn't feel like I had kind of just enough of a focus to really get it where I really wanted. And like when we played the second time, I was like, okay, I know some of this stuff a little bit better, and I was able to look at some of those things a little more, not to the extent that I would want, but a little bit more. And I just felt like our story just felt a little bit more kind of like
contained.
Yeah, fully contained and fleshed out and just like thoughtful.
I mean,
right?
In any creative process, one of the hardest things to do is to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Right? And when you have a system that actually sort of helps you contain things and not sort of concentrate on one or get sidetracked with any single element, allows you to literally go through the story arc in a very simple and unobtrusive way. And this game does that great.
It does, and I don't know if this kind of helps that too. And once again, I give credit to Lauren and Jesse, is the merry-go-round on the girls' sheet.
Yes.
So the facilitator, Tomes, never plays the girl. We always play the girl. So like if our character would maybe be in the background or something in the scene, one of us would play the girl, but you can actually hand it off at any moment, or Tomes might prompt somebody that like, hey, this might be a good opportunity. I want to see what your character is doing, your playbook is doing.
We're in a cottage in the scene, and the ogre can't get in.
Yeah.
You play the girl,
Right,
right?
exactly. And the thing is that the girl has 2 moves that require no dice roll, and one of them is merry-go-round, which is you just hand the character off to somebody else because you don't want you're either in a situation where you don't want to play it, or somebody else needs to bow out and you need to hand it over. And Curiouser is the other non-roll one. When you get some answers about this world or its inhabitants, ask the guide your question. If you are willing to participate in a peculiar activity, your answer will be surprisingly clear and helpful. If you're unwilling to your answer will take the form of a riddle, which we discussed is also kind of Tomes didn't take that as like literally making a riddle. He actually just made the information a little bit more obscure. And difficult to suss out.
It's riddle, not like a riddle.
Yeah, exactly. But that's also a real neat thing, is like encouraging you to buy into the weirdness of the world in order to get the answers that you want. Or if you want to resist that, it's going to take some more smarts for you to move through it, which I thought was a really great element.
I do really like the merry-go-round move. I don't remember if it was explicitly written as such when I did the playtest last year. I remember thinking about this, and even if it was there, I must have not noticed it. But I remember thinking about this, going like, what happens if I give the girl, let's say, to Gina, and then Gina also has her construct character, and both of them are in the scene. Like, I kind of don't want that one player talking to themselves, right? And one of the nice things that this move does is says, when you wish to introduce your companion to the scene, that's one of the triggers for handing the girl to somebody else. So when Gina wants her construct in the scene, because she's like, oh yeah, this would actually be a great place for Monty to speak up, you actually give that girl character to somebody else, so you have somebody to talk to. Somebody else is controlling the girl. And I think that is a really good mechanized way. It's very light mechanization there, but it's a perfect way to get that happening.
Because there's, as we've said before, there's not moves on moves on moves. So it was. I think I was pretty much always mindful that it was there when I had the girl. Yeah. That if
it's thoughtful design throughout this entire
think so
game.
too.
Such incredibly thoughtful design where things are sort of just perfectly set up, and everything's so well thought out and has a purpose. There's nothing in here that seems like it has no purpose.
But also it's super approachable.
Absolutely.
Everything, because I'm someone, I don't GM a lot because I have decision paralysis. That's my big GM issue. I can't make decisions. I'm afraid of making the wrong decision. But this seems something I can absolutely run. It's all the little signposts are there. You know where you're going. It's open enough that you can let the players make decisions for you and play off that. You're not responsible for every decision yourself. So I love this game.
To that point, and I think it's so great you brought that up, because I'll make stuff up sometimes, but also there's that great place where it's like, I know I want them to be scared of this person, but I don't know why, or I don't know what to do to make it scary.
Yeah.
So don't. You ask questions, and that's what this game is about. You turn to the person and you say, what about that person scares the shit out of you?
Yeah.
And they're going to answer you something that actually makes sense for them.
I
right?
loved that on my character sheet. I just have to say there was one of the things where I got to define as what was, I don't know, it was like a positive quality about my character, and I ended up, I could have picked eyes or warmth is what I went with.
Yeah.
But then there was something that was very uncomfortable about my character. Sorry, I'm the one that, I don't know why it keeps peeking. But yeah, I decided his smile was really wonky.
And off-putting.
And off-putting.
And it was.
It was.
So good.
It's a good talking pen. What do you expect?
Yep.
I loved him.
But
I want to play him more.
Now, I think that we've covered sort of like what this game is about fairly well. But so before we close off, I just want to hear if anybody, what's the takeaway from this game? What will you take after playing this game and actually try to use it in either your GMing or storytelling or playing style from now on? Are there elements of this game that you thought sort of increased your tool set as far as a role player goes?
Just the hard reinforcement of what Tomes just brought up, which is the asking questions is so powerful. So we've talked in the past about how you can, have really great descriptions, or even if they're brief, they don't have to be box text about things to kind of inspire creativity and thoughtfulness, but questions are very, very powerful. Particularly when you want to, not do all the heavy lifting.
Right.
And just to tag on that, if people are watching and they're like, but what does that mean? Like, how do I frame a question? And sometimes it's not as simple as just asking the question. You want to ask, there's definitely a way to ask the questions which gets you moving in a direction and gets the person, contributing in a certain way. I highly recommend looking at I know Jason Cordova used to talk about this a lot off of the Gauntlet, and there was a Gauntlet blog about it, which is called Painting the Scene. And Painting the Scene is talking about how to ask questions of the players in such a way that reinforces the theme that you want in that scene. And he's talking about it in general for games, but using those kind of questions in this game is just it's just easy and beautiful, and it'll hit the mark. Right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good distinction.
Yeah.
Anything, Joey?
I mean, for me, the biggest eye-opener was the lack of advancement, or the idea of advancing a character through story as opposed to actual mechanical advancement. And I really like that. And I think implementing that in more games, even if the game already has an experience mechanic, but using milestones for advancement as opposed to XP, story. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a big takeaway that I want to try to bring to more of my games as a character and as a potential GM.
As a GM, it's
That's
super
very
important
cool.
because setting up goals and resolution of those goals for individual characters is the way that you as a GM promote character development for your players. And if you're not keeping an eye on what those motivations are and trying to provide something for those characters, and also as a player, providing those for your GM, let them know what your character wants. Because if your GM doesn't know what your character wants, it's very hard for him to write or put things in there that will really motivate your character and going through in the plot. But the thing that I really get from this game, and the thing that sort of reinforces some of my thinking on this, is that I've said this before on several of these podcasts, is that I think role-playing game is a conversation. It needs to be a back and forth, and it needs to be a thing where everybody's asking the right questions and providing answers for their characters and for the story. This game is absolutely a conversation. From beginning to end, it's a conversation. The first thing that you do is you start asking questions and answering them and establishing truths. And so as far as a collaborative game and the fact that everybody sort of shares playing one character, this is a perfect broken down example of how these conversations go and how they can provide you with great storytelling
I
opportunities.
think so too, and it's, if I may, it's not a one and done. It's there are so many great games, and I fall in love with games all the time. But there are a lot of them where you can scratch an itch, and it was a fantastic game, and it's well written. But this, it sounds simple, but this game could give you a lot of enjoyable play as a campaign or more than one. Like I would love to see more adventures with those characters and that girl.
Yeah, I'm already plotting in my head how to make it
Right?
into a campaign
Absolutely.
game.
Yeah, no,
Well,
just
with
there's
a lot of these story
in-
games, the opportunity for you to really make longer, broader stories isn't really there. I mean, themes like Skeletons that we played, games like 10 Candles, they're really kind of designed to be a one shot. This, on the other hand, there's a lot more exploration that you can go through, and the fact that the milestones that you get and the way that you advance are really sort of like coming up with new ways to love yourself and be confident. And wow, what a great positive game!
And I think if you look at the media touchstones for this game, because a lot of them were movies, right? The ones that we mentioned and the ones that are mentioned at the top here. There's that tendency to go oh, I'm going to quickly tell a story that's kind of like one of these movies, and that is a one shot, right? Or 2 or 3 session. But if you look at YA novels or other kind of longer form fiction around this kind of thematic material,
Absolutely.
you could totally take this as kind of like a longer journey through a bigger, broader world and explore more of this slowly over time. But I do want to let other designers know, look at this game,
Yeah.
like the way it does the GM guide and everything in such a small space. Like there is no fluff, just like Jim was saying. Like there's
Safety.
nothing.
Yeah.
The safety conversation, everything.
The gender.
I mean,
yeah.
this to me, it's
And
just like this
exploration, yeah.
very great example of how to design a great game for somebody to just feel supported running
I think
and
for,
playing.
For
right?
everyone that's writing RPG and is writing the section, that ubiquitous section at the beginning of every RPG is, what's a role-playing game? Look at this and look at the tools that it provides for people wanting to run
It's
the game.
really
and it's
good.
vastly superior than just explaining out of rote what an RPG is. This tells
Yep.
you how to run the RPG.
Yep.
And in a very
It
succinct.
supports.
Everything about this is supportive. The
Yeah.
entire game is just supportive. Everything supports the players of the GM, and
Yeah.
every rule is written meticulously to do that exactly. And I'm just stunned by how well this is written.
Yeah.
Girl Underground.
Girl Underground.
So
Yeah.
if you're interested
2
in
thumbs
this
up.
game, there is, if you did like a quick Google search on Girl Underground RPG, you'll find the Girl Underground website. So I think that's
Girl Underground, all one word, .org.
Yeah. And you'll also you'll probably see the Kickstarter page there as well. Again, both of those, the Girl Underground website, you can go there and it'll give you a link to Drive Through RPG where you can get the PDF. So even if you can't get it in this lovely zine form, you can easily get the electronic version if you want to read or run the game.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for episode 6 of Small Game Hunter. I hope everybody enjoyed the ride, and we'll be picking up, or at least trying to read through this Girl Underground role-playing game, which is highly recommended by everyone here at this table.
And once
Oh,
again,
yeah.
shout out to Lauren McManaman and
Yeah.
Jesse Ross.
Jesse
The
Ross.
two
Yeah.
of them are
Yeah.
fantastic individuals. I will vouch for them till the end
This
of the
is
world.
also true.
But they're also amazing. game
Also,
designers.
keep it up, man.
Yeah.
Because this, more
Yeah.
products like this.
I can't wait for the full campaign book.
Yeah.
Give
I
it
know.
me.
Yeah.
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 But, so we'll leave you with a reminder, when you tell stories together, you make memories together, and that's what we want to do, right? So, goodbye, everybody. This is Jim.
Joey.
Tomes.
Gina.
Caught off guard.
Caught off guard, but good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.